Welcome back, NFL fans. So today we're going to talk about the head coaching vacancies in the NFL and which jobs are the most attractive based on their futures. So we're going to talk about 8 teams here, actually, because I included the Raiders. I'm going to assume that maybe Rich Bisaccia is not safe. Maybe he is. We'll find out. But I did include the Raiders on this list. So we have 8 teams. We have the Bears, Vikings, Texans, Jaguars, Raiders, Giants, Broncos, Dolphins. 8 teams we're going to talk about. I'll start off by talking about their situation. Then at the end of the video, I'll rank their situation in my opinion. Hopefully you guys enjoy this video. So in the comments, leave how you guys would rank these head coaching spots, and let's get into it. So this is in no particular order, I believe, but we're going to start with the Broncos. We're going to start with Denver, and they have an extra 2nd and 3rd round pick this year from the Von Miller trade, which looking back on it, it's an awesome move by them. I don't know how they got a 2nd and 3rd round pick for like 32-year-old Von Miller, but good for them. So that's going to be appealing. They have 5 picks inside the top 100. So if you're a head coach, you come in there, work with the GM, you have very high picks and can help turn that team around even more. And look, they already have a good roster on paper. We know the Broncos are a quarterback away from being legitimate Super Bowl contenders. Now, finding that great quarterback is not very easy. We do know that, of course. Like trading for Russell Wilson, not easy. Trading for Deshaun Watson, not easy. You have to give up a ton of assets. But as I said, 5 picks in the top 100 can help you get there if they indeed want to trade for one of those quarterbacks. So the problem is they have Drew Lock, Teddy Bridgewater. Not much of an answer. Not going too far with those guys as we saw this year. Right now, they have the 7th most cap space in the NFL and a lot of young talent. You look up and down that roster, they have a ton of young talent. Guys like Javonte Williams, Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, Noah Fant, they have Garrett Bowles, they have Shelby Harris, Bradley Chubb, Pat Surtain. Like, they have a ton of talented guys on this roster, young guys too on like rookie contracts. So that, of course, is very appealing. You can really come into the Broncos organization, trade for a great quarterback, even like a pretty good quarterback. Let's say Derek Carr is on the market. You can trade for a Derek Carr, and he may have the ability to take the Broncos to the promised land once again. So to me, this is a very appealing job. I'm not going to reveal where I put it on the list, but I love what the Broncos have going on right now. Sure, it's very hard to find a quarterback. Broncos fans know that, having gone through Flacco, Simeon, Keenum, Bridgewater, Locke ever since Peyton Manning left, Paxton Lynch. So I get it, not easy, but they are just one spot away from being a Super Bowl contender. So I love this Broncos job opening. Next, we have the Chicago Bears, who moved on from Matt Nagy, of course. Now, the Bears do not have a first-round pick in 2022. They traded up for Justin Fields last year, and my team, the Giants, actually got their first-round pick. It was supposed to be 7th overall. Now they don't have it. So they also don't have a 4th-round pick this year, so that's not very good with in terms of like draft assets for this draft. Now, in all likelihood, you have to stay with Justin Fields for another year, so there's kind of like that quarterback mandate of you have to stick with this guy for at least 2022. I know that in this modern NFL, quarterbacks have much shorter leashes, but I'd be pretty surprised if Justin Fields is a one-and-done quarterback there for Chicago. I think he's back next year. The Bears have the 13th most cap space right now. They have some guys moving on. They're in contract years. You know, I'd be surprised if Allen Robinson's back. Maybe Akeem Hicks wants to move on as well. So they have a couple guys that are on bigger contracts that could move on there. So they do have young pieces on this roster. Guys like Darnell Mooney, Cole Kmet's decent. Jalen Johnson's a cornerback I like. Roquan Smith is really coming to his own the last couple years here. He was a former top 10 pick for them. So they have guys on that roster that are definitely building blocks. So that's definitely something to like about that team right now. Now, the Bears' offensive line needs a lot of work. They moved on from guys like Leno and Massey. They lost a bunch of offensive linemen there. So their offensive line got worse. And they need Tevin Jenkins to work out. They traded up for him in round 2 last year. He had a very up and down rookie year. So they need him to work out. They need other offensive line pieces, but you get to work with a new GM, so that's always cool. They get a new GM there. Ryan Pace, their previous GM, was fired, so there's a new GM, new head coach, so you might get like a longer leash there because of that with the Bears. And I think Matt Nagy lasted like 4 seasons there, made the playoffs twice, so he had some success, but the Bears situation is not great, but I could see a scenario where if Justin Fields has a breakout year 2, this can turn into a very good-looking situation if he does break out. Next, we have the Houston Texans, and this was a rough spot for David Culley. I feel bad for the guy because I thought the Texans on paper were like a 1 or 2 win team at most. This guy got 4 wins out of him, which I think is pretty impressive, so I do feel bad for Culley off the bat. Now, there is a rumor that Brian Flores may want to go there. Brian Flores has been rumored to want Deshaun Watson, so there's a chance that maybe Flores goes there. He convinces Watson to stay. We never know, but that's definitely a possibility there for the Texans, so maybe they already have their next head coach there in the works. We'll find out. Now, of course, with Deshaun Watson, there's uncertainty. There's like 3 options here. He's either your franchise quarterback, you either trade him for a ton of assets, get multiple first-round picks, extra second, third-round picks. It would be a massive haul for a guy like Deshaun Watson at 26, 27 years old. But there's also the possibility that Deshaun Watson runs into legal trouble and is just not part of the team. So there's like three main outcomes there for Deshaun Watson, which is very, it's just not something you want to go into as a head coach, of course. There's a lot of just what if with that scenario. So they have an extra pick in round 3. They got one from the Saints for Bradley Roby this season. They made that in-season trade, I believe. They are 15th in cap space. Now, I did think the Texans would be higher because I was thinking, who the hell are the Texans paying right now? But I guess there is David Johnson right now. There is the left tackle Tunsil making a ton of money. I guess the Zach Cunningham contract did not work out too well for them, of course, so that might be some dead money. So they got that going, of course, but I did figure they'd have more. Their defense has, some pieces. Guys like Jonathan Grenard had a great year 2, I think it is, for him. He was great this year. Maybe Ross Blacklock, but there's not many defensive pieces going forward. I like Desmond King, but he's 27 by now. So there's not many pieces on this defense. This roster needs a lot of work. It's like a 3 or 4 win team on paper, but they do have some draft assets. They can trade Deshaun Watson for a ton. And when Watson comes back, you would assume this could hopefully, if they won 4 games with Tyrod Taylor, Davis Mills, you're thinking of if Deshaun Watson comes back, it could be a 7 or 8 win team. Maybe a couple things break your way. Maybe they find a way to make the playoffs. I don't know, but it's not the best situation. You have to draft right. You have to spend right in free agency, but there is some freedom there. So I will say Deshaun Watson makes the whole situation very murky. A lot of stuff can happen, of course, but it's not the worst job opening in the world. I'll put it that way. Next, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars. And of course, the Jaguars have the generational talent at quarterback in Trevor Lawrence, who had a very down rookie year. You can't put much of it on him, unfortunately. It was just a very awful situation. Yes, Lawrence could have done better himself, and I expected more, but I kind of just throw away that rookie year and say, all right, we'll see what happens in year 2. So I'm not worried about Trevor, of course. Now, they currently have the 3rd most cap space in the NFL. Very appealing, of course. They spent some money last offseason, Marvin Jones, Shaquille Griffin, guys like that, but not a ton. They have money, of course. A lot of rookie contracts there. The offensive line absolutely needs work. I mean, the tackle spots, especially Jawan Taylor at right tackle, I think was a 2nd-round pick, has not really worked out so far. Left tackle Cam Robinson, I think, had a decent year this year, but he's had a track record of not being that great in the past, so maybe you move on there. I think Andrew Norwell's contract may be up. Yeah, Brandon Linder at center, he's a good player, but their offensive line, for the most part, does need some more upgrades, obviously. They have weapons, though. Looking at the Jaguars, you have Travis Etienne for the future. I think DJ Chark may be up for a contract at some point, but you have Marvin Jones, you have Laviska Shenault, who I do like. I don't know why Chenault's not good, but I do like him. You have Jamal Agnew, who was a nice gadget player for them this year. They have some talent. Even Dan Arnold was a good tight end for them before he got hurt. So they have talented weapons on this team, so they at least have that in place for Trevor Lawrence going forward. Now, the roster overall needs a lot of work, but there are some building block pieces. Like I mentioned, Shaq Griffin, I think, is only 26 years old. Josh Allen, the edge rusher, still a young guy, rookie contract still. Travis Etienne missed his entire rookie season. Hopefully he's fine. He could be a very explosive player in the pass game and the running game, of course. So, for this team, I would lean offensive head coach because you are looking to get the most out of Trevor Lawrence, especially on his rookie contract. So if I'm the Jaguars, I'm looking at a Brian Dable type guy to just come in there, get the best out of Trevor Lawrence, and we'll take it from there because the entire Jaguars' future rides on Trevor Lawrence. It's no surprise. This is not breaking news. So if they get him right, then they can be a good team. Their defense needs a lot of pieces. I get that, of course, but they have the money in free agency that if they spend it wisely and get the right guys in and draft the right way, they can build this team pretty quickly. Just you have to do it right. There's a chance this can get even worse, or you have the assets to make it even better. So we'll find out. It depends on hiring the right people, which is the case for everybody, but at least Jacksonville has a chance to get out of that dark spot if they hire the right people. Next, we have the Las Vegas Raiders. Of course, Bisaccia could be back next year. We'll find out. They have their playoff game in a few hours from now, so we'll find out what happens there, of course. Now, for the Raiders, I mean, they're in a somewhat similar situation to the Vikings where it's like, okay, they're good enough to make the playoffs, but can they have a Super Bowl ceiling with their current situation? So I'd be shocked if the Raiders went that far. Like if they won this week, I could see that, but getting past the divisional round, I feel like is a very tall task for a team like that. So they don't really have that Super Bowl ceiling that you're looking for a team, but they are in a good cap space situation. They have the 11th most cap space right now, which is not that bad. They are paying some guys some pretty decent sized contracts, but I do know at least for a couple guys like Derek Carr and Darren Waller in particular, they're on very team friendly contracts. Like they're making a decent amount of money, but the contracts are steals, so like it's not all that bad. There's not like any like awful contracts on that team. I don't think. I'm trying to think right now. Like maybe Yannick Ngakoue. I don't know how much he made this offseason, but yeah, there's not like a terrible contract that comes to mind on the Raiders right now. Now, there is 1 year of Derek Carr left after this year. It's a $19 million cap hit, which is very team-friendly for a quarterback like Carr, who I think should be making probably somewhere from $25 to $30 million per year. But $19 million cap hit for Derek Carr is pretty appealing. I don't know what his next contract will look like. I think Carr is 30 years old now, so that, of course, is a question that has to come up. Do you want to work with Derek Carr going forward, or should we look for our next quarterback? That's going to be a question the next head coach and GM have to answer there. The offensive line definitely needs work outside of Colton Miller, their left tackle. He was taken back in 2018. He's turned out to be a nice pick for them. But outside of that, they got rid of Rodney Hudson, Gabe Jackson, Trent Brown. Their offensive line definitely needs some work there for the Raiders. They were good a few years ago, but they lost a lot of pieces, including Kelechi Osemele, who was there at one point. So they need some offensive line pieces there for Las Vegas. Now, you have some weapons to work with. Darren Waller, Josh Jacobs, Hunter Renfrow was great this year, so you have that going for you. You have a quarterback in Derek Carr who's pretty good for the most part. He's not top 10 in my opinion. Maybe he is in some of your opinions, but for me, he's not there, but he's close. So Derek Carr is the type of guy that can go on and run for you. Maybe you find some, lightning in a bottle and maybe he makes a Super Bowl run. It's possible, but we'll find out what the next head coach wants to do with that situation there. So for the Raiders, there's things to like, but there's also that fear that they're kind of stuck in mediocrity, so it kind of makes the job less appealing. But if you bring in the right guy and that guy can get the most out of Derek Carr and they can kind of fix their defense in certain areas, then hey, maybe the Raiders are good enough to be more than just a team that makes the playoffs and gets out in the first round. So next we have the Miami Dolphins. Of course, Brian Flores was pretty shockingly fired, at least in my opinion. So currently they have the most cap space in the NFL. Of course, that's very attractive for any head coach coming in. Not many big contracts on that team. They're paying Devontae Parker a decent amount, not a ton. They gave Will Fuller a 1-year deal. There's just not many guys making a lot of money on that team. I think Byron Jones got a nice payday, but that's one guy. I mean, of course, they have young guys that have to be paid eventually, but as for right now, they do have the most cap space at this moment. So they don't own their own first-round pick, which is not appealing, of course, because the Dolphins, they would have had, the 16th, 17th pick in this year's draft, but they do have the 49ers first-round pick. We'll see how far they go. If they lose this weekend, it could be somewhere from 20 to 22 or something, so that's not too much of a fall-off. So they have the 49ers first-round pick. They have their own second-round pick. They have the 49ers third-round pick. They gave away their third-round pick. They gave away their first-round pick, but they still have picks to make up for, so it's not the worst situation in terms of draft assets. Now, they have young talent on the roster. Of course, Jalen Waddle just broke the rookie reception record. Christian Wilkins was a stud in year 3. Javon Holland was a great, rookie safety out of Oregon. So they have some young talent on that team. They have guys that are already established, guys like Devontae Parker, guys like Byron Jones, Xavier Howard. Now, the problem is their offensive line needs a ton of work. They don't have many keepers on the offensive line right now. Their offensive line stinks, and Tua had to get rid of the ball very quickly, so that's a problem, of course, but you got to do that. I don't know if Tua is the answer for the future, so those parts of the team may have to be fixed, of course, but overall, it's not a bad situation whatsoever, and they already have a winning culture established. Thanks to Brian Flores, they went 10-6 and 9-8 the past 2 years. This is not a Jacksonville Jaguars, New York Giants situation where the teams are so freaking bad and you have to come in and establish the winning culture. The winning culture is already there. You just have to come in there and just get them over the top. They're this close to making the playoffs every year. Yes, you play in a tough division with the Bills, and now the Patriots are good. If Zach Wilson's good, the Jets may be a threat in the future, but for the most part, the Dolphins are in a pretty good spot, and they're a few tweaks away from possibly being a really good team, so it's not a bad situation. I wish they had more of their own draft picks, but it is what it is, but overall, it's a pretty nice spot to be the Dolphins head coach. Next, we have the Minnesota Vikings. The bad news is you're stuck with Kirk Cousins for at least another year. I don't think you can get out of that contract, so it's Kirk Cousins for 2022. I mean, on paper, it's a pretty good team. They have pieces, of course. We know that. The Vikings have a talented team. They won, 7 games this year? They blew so many games. They probably should have been a 9 or 10 win team this year. They spent money last offseason on the defense, and they did disappoint, which was surprising. So maybe it was Mike Zimmer's time to go. I get that, of course. Now, they have a mixture of young talent and guys that are kind of on the back 9 of their careers. So, I mean, they have Patrick Peterson, Everson Griffin, guys like that are not really a part of the future. Even Harrison Smith has to be over 30 by now. so he's still playing at a high level though. Now, they have negative $13 million in cap space, so some guys will have to be let go or cut by that team, so I don't know who that would be, but they do not have the best financial situation in terms of cap space going forward. But they're in a weird spot because I feel like that team is too good where you can't just throw out the entire roster and just rebuild completely. You have to keep some of those pieces, but they're also good enough where if you add the right guys and you finally move on from Cousins and get the right quarterback, then the Vikings actually could be like contenders. So it's a weird spot. Like, it depends who that head coach is, what vision he has for that team, because I could see a scenario where they want to go all in again for 2022, or I could see a scenario where you want to rebuild with that team. So it's going to be interesting where ownership wants to go with that team and things like that. But, of course, having guys like Justin Jefferson and Danielle Hunter and, Eric Kendricks, guys like that, it's an appealing job for that reason. But, you also have Kirk Cousins, who is known to be just a mediocre quarterback in terms of making the playoffs, and he puts up great numbers. I get that. His numbers were phenomenal this year, but just in terms of actually winning football games, winning the big games, Kirk Cousins has not been that guy so far. So there's always a cap on how far you can go with him, but the Vikings overall have intriguing pieces, but it depends. Do they want to rebuild, or do they want to actually go all in for next season? And last and certainly not least, the New York Football Giants. Now, there's plenty of draft assets here. They have 2 first-round picks, number 5, number 7, and 2 third-round picks. So they have 5 picks in the top 90 or 80 maybe. I don't know. It's a very good draft asset year for the Giants. We like seeing that, of course. You maybe have some freedom at the quarterback position. Now, Daniel Jones is entering year 4. He has not shown enough to be kept by the Giants for sure, but there's also a scenario where they don't find anybody else that's a good enough replacement and they just stick it out with Jones for another year. And that could buy you some more time as a head coach because Daniel Jones has no ties to the next head coach and GM for the Giants, of course. So that's also another part. The next head coach gets to work with a new GM, so there's probably going to be a connection there. That's a good part. They have some bigger contracts, guys like Kenny Golladay, Leonard Williams, and guys that are overpaid, but you can get out of some contracts like Sterling Shepard. I think you can get out of Blake Martinez, James Bradbury maybe. So you can get out of some contracts there, but it's not the best cap space situation for the Giants right now. Unfortunately, they have the 28th most cap space at the moment. Now, there is some young talent on this team, not a ton, but there's a few guys. Andrew Thomas looks like a franchise left tackle if he stays healthy. We'll see about that, of course. Azeez Ojulari is a rookie pass rusher, second-round pick. He had 8 or 9 sacks this year. He was great. It was very up and down, inconsistent year, but he definitely showed enough flashes where he could be a part of the future there. And Kadarius Toney. Toney was the first-round pick for the Giants last year. He was 20th overall, and the Giants traded back, of course, with the Bears, and Toney with the ball in his hands is electric, but he could not stay healthy. He had multiple injuries as a rookie, so that's kind of a red flag, but he's very talented. So the Giants have some good things going for them, but also some concerns. Not enough young talent. There's not a lot of cap space. The quarterback situation is, there's nothing really settled right now about that, but there is some freedom with that, so I'm sure a head coach would like that. So, yeah, the Giants are not in a bad spot, but also it could be a lot better. All right, so with that being said, I'm going to rank these guys from 1 to 8, but we'll start at the bottom here to make it easy or make it more suspenseful. That's the word I'm looking for. So, number 8 for me is the Houston Texans, and I do think in a perfect world, you want Deshaun Watson back, of course. He's one of the better quarterbacks in the league, talent-wise, and it's just hard to replace Deshaun Watson. It really is. So if you get Deshaun Watson back, it becomes a more appealing job. But just looking at that team on paper, it's really bad. They don't have anyone defensively that's worth caring about right now. Their offense, Brandon Cooks is a nice player, but there's not much else going on there. It's just really there's not much to work with. There's so much talent that has to be added to this team, and you have Tunsil at left tackle making $1 billion a year, and then the rest of the offensive line is not that great. Guys like Titus Howard did not work out really as a high draft pick. They signed that former Seahawks center. He had a nice year for them. I forget his name, Justin Britt maybe, but he's an older guy, so I'm not sure if they want to keep him around. So that offensive line needs work. A lot of the Texans roster needs work, so it's a tough situation. It's a clear rebuild there, but if you get Deshaun Watson back, or you can trade Deshaun Watson for a bunch of picks. That's going to make it a lot better, but I have to put them at number 8 right now. Don't feel great about them. Number 7 is the Chicago Bears. Maybe a surprise, but when I saw they did not have their own first-round pick, which is a top 10 pick, number 7, you're stuck with Justin Fields, who, a lot of people like Justin Fields. He definitely has the physical tools, but a lot of like just the processing and the inaccurate passes and the bad decisions, the turnovers, that stuff has to be fixed, of course. Now, I think if you get the right OC, right head coach in there, play caller, you can get a lot out of Justin Fields, but it depends on who that guy is. So there's that. I mean, there's some veterans leaving. I mentioned Allen Robinson, Akeem Hicks, a guy like Khalil Mack's not getting any younger. Eddie Jackson has not been the same guy the last year or so for them at safety. So there's some red flags there. The Bears defense is not as good as it once was. Their offensive line needs a ton of work, and not having your own first round pick is not very appealing. So I have to put them lower on the list, but if Justin Fields once again breaks out in year 2, that job becomes a whole lot more attractive. Number 6, I put the Minnesota Vikings. I mean, once again, you're stuck with Kirk Cousins for a year. I don't like that. Your offensive line needs work. They do every year, it seems like. Dalvin Cook's now 27 years old, getting up there a bit. Adam Thielen's older. There's just guys that are aging veterans on this roster. I mentioned Everson Griffin. I mentioned somebody else. I mean, Harrison Smith's over 30 once again, and Patrick Peterson's probably a one and done there in Minnesota. They probably can't afford him once again. So there's guys that are older, probably have to go, and you have a young core. Justin Jefferson, of course. They signed Dalvin Tomlinson. Michael Pierce, I don't think is that old, but you have Danielle Hunter, who's a young guy. But I don't know. I mean, it's a weird situation with the Vikings because once again, you can win with them, but you also have a ceiling with that team. It's not a Super Bowl team right now, especially with Kirk Cousins there, but they're also too good to rebuild entirely. So it's a weird one. They're kind of stuck in that middle spot, so I'll put them in number 6 here on this list. Number 5 for me is the Jacksonville Jaguars. That roster needs a whole lot of work, but at least you have some guys to build around. Shaquille Griffin on defense, Josh Allen on defense. You have that going for you. I mentioned Jacksonville has weapons. They have a guy that was labeled as a generational quarterback in Trevor Lawrence. Now you need an offensive line. I talked about that, of course. That's very important for a team like this. I think an offensive coach is needed for a team like this. So it's not all bad. They can go out there and spend money in free agency. They have that, leeway, of course, to sign some free agents. They have high draft picks. So, I think the Jaguars can turn it around relatively quickly. They just need the right guys in that place. So, if they can get Trevor Lawrence to have a complete 180 in year 2, that team can be looking a whole lot better. Next for me is the Raiders. You have 1 year left with Derek Carr, team-friendly contract, of course, but once again with the Raiders, I don't see a Super Bowl ceiling for that team right now. There's pieces to like on that team very much. Even Casey Hayward had a really good year, but he's an older guy now, so not really a part of the future. But you have Ngakoue, you have Crosby as your pass rushers. That's very intriguing. You have your left tackle, which is nice. You have weapons, Renfro, Waller. But, Trayvon Merrick is a pretty good safety in his first year, so that's good to see, of course. But I don't know. This team definitely just doesn't do it for me. I don't know what it is with the Raiders, but, I think you can come in there and make them an 8, 9, 10 win team, but I just don't know how far they can go. And eventually there might be a rebuild happening if Derek Carr moves on and you can't find your future quarterback. So there are question marks with that situation, but it's an average situation. It's a playoff team right now, so there's some good vibes around the Raiders, but I don't know. There's just a lot of question marks for the future, and especially Derek Carr with only 1 year left on his contract. Next, I put the New York Giants. Of course, they have the high draft picks this year, which is very nice. 2 top 10 picks, which is very appealing. Once again, maybe some freedom with the quarterback position. Maybe you get an offensive head coach that can get the most out of Daniel Jones. Maybe the Giants get a better offensive line, so you have those options. But the bad part for the Giants is you can't spend much in free agency. Some bad contracts once again, so that's a part where you don't like seeing that, of course. But the Giants have a losing culture. I mean, the last 3 head coaches were fired after 2 years. So, yeah, there's definitely some bad parts about this job, but there's also some intriguing parts that head coaches will look forward to, like the high draft picks, like the freedom at the quarterback position, like the weapons they have, Galladay, Tony, Saquon Barkley, things like that. So there's some good things about this team. Their defense is pretty good. They're average at least. They're definitely not like a bad defense. I would say they're just above average. So the Giants defense has some pieces, so they have that going for them. So the cap space sucks, but for the most part, the Giants is a pretty good situation. Second, I put the Miami Dolphins. I mentioned they already have that winning culture established. You might have to find a new quarterback. You have to find some offensive linemen. But the Dolphins, for the most part, whether it's defensively, weapons-wise, they have a good team. Like, they have enough pieces to be a good team. We see them go over 500 the past 2 years. And, I think Brian Flores was a good head coach. I don't know what happened there exactly. Maybe him and the owner did not get along, apparently. So, I don't know what the problem was there. there. But anyway, I do think they need a better quarterback upgrade at some point. Maybe Tua gets year 3, but I think I've kind of seen who he is by now, and maybe they have as well. So a quarterback upgrade is probably something that has to happen at some point, whether it's this year or next year. So we'll find out about that. But the Dolphins have a lot going for them. They have talented pieces, a lot of cap space once again. So it's a pretty intriguing situation there in Miami. And then number 1 for me, the best situation is the Denver Broncos. I kind of talked about them earlier, how much I like that situation. And it's tough to find a quarterback. I totally get it. But every other aspect of that team is in a pretty good spot. The offensive line has young pieces that I like, of course. Even Quinn Miners was a guy who was like a 3rd-round pick. I like him. So they have young pieces on the O-line, a defense that's a win-now type defense. I think they were like 3rd overall in like points allowed on defense this year, which is very good. So you have that going for you. You have weapons on that team, obviously. Javonte, Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Fant. You have a lot of weapons on that team offensively. You just need a damn quarterback. That's all you need is just a damn quarterback. Maybe they trade up in the draft this year and get one. I think they're like this, what are they, the 8th or 9th pick this year or something? I have no idea. But the Broncos have a somewhat high pick. Maybe they love a guy. I could see like a Kenny Pickett going there or Matt Corral. So we'll see about that. But the Broncos have a lot going for them. They have cap space still, which is great. So the Broncos for me is number 1. So once again, Broncos 1, Dolphins 2, Giants 3, Raiders 4, Jaguars 5, Vikings 6, Bears 7, Texans 8. So those are my head coaching vacancies in order based on the attractiveness of those situations. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and I will talk to you guys next time.